Hello and welcome back to another session of our as of yet unnamed podcast. I am joined by Al himself, aka Al Rogers. Last time you were listening to us, we were talking about the juggernaut Avengers Endgame, which is now sitting at somewhere around $2.4 billion, just about a little over 300 million shy of getting to beating Avatar. And today I asked him or us to be moving on to our next movie, which is Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, starring Zac Efron, which is who was most famous for back in the day High School Musical. And with this movie, he was starring as Ted Bundy, one of the most infamous, I should say, and evil serial killers of all time. Al, did you have a chance to watch the movie on Netflix?
I did.
I see.
Saw it this morning.
Okay. So
it's very fresh on my mind.
In a good way or a bad way, or both?
Both. I think there's a lot to be said about the movie. Both from the actor's perspective and some of the cinematography in the film. So overall, I think Netflix did a really good job in producing this movie here.
Yeah, I agree. My initial thoughts, because the movie itself was not that long, I think it was somewhere around an hour and a half long, and it surprised me because the movie picked up basically from when he was already a serial killer and doing a bunch of evil shit and hiding that life.
Well, on that, so the movie does jump around a bit chronologically. Which I think added to the suspense of the film. But you're right in that the movie does start from when he's already an established killer.
And I like that, though. I like that, yeah, it does jump around in time, but overall the main storyline is where he already has a love interest who he's hiding his double life from, and he's already committed. It's hinted that he's already committed several murders and he's already on the run. And I like that. I like that the movie did not bother to set up what he has been doing. It picks up from where he already is living a double life and is already a committed killer. So I like that. I like that part about the movie. So how much did you know about Ted Bundy before going into this, I guess, drama thriller starring Zac Efron?
Nothing. I didn't know anything about the killer. I didn't know when the trial took place. I didn't know. I didn't even know how the movie would end. So all of everything I know about Ted Bundy is focused around that movie. Didn't do any outside reading prior to the movie or even after the movie. As I said, I finished it a couple of hours ago.
Well, just reading off of one of the key lines on Wikipedia, which I think they repeated this line in text at the end of the movie. It says, Theodore Robert Bundy, born November 24th, died January 24th, 1989. After more than a decade of denials, he confessed to 30 homicides that he committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. The true number of victims is unknown and possibly much higher.
Yeah. So I do remember reading that at the very end of the film there. And I also thought it was also very interesting that at the end of the film they show actual clips of real life Ted Bundy talking about his or they were sharing moments of his last few days in prison, and then also some of the facts regarding the case. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I thought, so throughout the time I was watching the movie, I wasn't sure how accurate it was to real life, like all the different things that he did, all the stunts that he pulled and whatnot. But when they showed those clips at the end, like where he was mocking the guy who was putting him on live television, saying something like, "Oh, you said you were gonna get me, you got me," I thought for a second they were inventing that just for the movie, but it turns out that that actually happened in real life. So
Well, the actor did make it seem like he was so much smoother. But then in the actual clip, it was kind of awkward. Um, but yeah, that was an interesting choice to add to the movie.
yes, it absolutely was, and I'm glad that they did that too. So one part about the movie that I thought was kind of gratuitous, although it may have also happened, was you remember the sex scene between him and I don't remember, man, this is not a good look on me, but the lady who was like the lady with the glasses who was kind of falling in love with him. I think her name was Carol.
Oh, yeah, Carol Ann. Yeah,
Yes,
Carol Ann.
Carol
And
Ann Boone.
uh, no, go on.
The thing about that scene was I don't know if that actually happened in real life. It looked like it took place in jail and he paid off a guard just so he could have some alone time with her and then they have sex. I don't know if any of that is true, but it is true that she became pregnant because Ted Bundy has a living daughter in real life. So who knows? That part could have been real as well. And
Right. Well, he must have been having sex somehow, some way with her.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so maybe paying off the guard was the director taking some liberties with the truth, but um, he he had to have been having sex with her somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, behind the scenes, he must have been having sex with her somehow. They also included, oh, in terms of real clips, they included a clip of his mom, who said, ironic also that today's Mother's Day. So shout out to all the mothers, happy Mother's Day, because it's Sunday, Sunday, May 12th. So happy Mother's Day to all.
Don't forget to call your mom.
Do not, yeah, because you know that she loves you or that she should love you. All y'all out there who have mothers. Anyway, so
That's everyone. Everyone has mothers.
literally all the human beings out there, yeah. But they had a clip in the movie about of his mom, which they replicated as a scene in the movie. They had a clip of his mom saying something
Yeah.
along the lines of,
But before we continue on with this podcast, uh, we should really throw on a spoiler alert at the very beginning because we're just tossing
yeah,
all the plot points out
true,
there. Pretty
yeah,
much everything that happened in the movie, we're just going on about.
yeah,
So if you haven't seen the movie already, pause, go
yeah.
watch the movie, then come back to the podcast.
We already, yeah, true. We should, from here on out, we should probably do that at the beginning of our podcast. But yeah, so from here on out, spoiler warning, even though we revealed a lot of plot points, and this is based on a true story, but still. Now, Ted Bundy's mom was interviewed, and as I was saying, it's a scene replicated in the movie itself, that she was saying nobody should deserve the death penalty, like, you know, the electric chair, you know, that's a horrible way for any person to go. Now, what I want to know is, when she was interviewed saying this, was she, first of all, not fully aware of the crimes that her son had committed, first of all? And second of all, if she was made aware, did she just not believe any of these things? Because...
Well, I mean, are I lost track of that. Are you talking about his mother, or are you talking about the young lady at the end who has his child?
No, I'm talking about his mother, because Carol Ann Boone definitely, for whatever reason, did not think that he was guilty. But yeah, I was talking about his
Right.
mom.
The argument his mother was making at the end was not that her child was innocent, but that giving sentencing him to a death sentence was not the right decision. I think she fully understood the magnitude of the crimes that her child had committed, and what she was hoping to push the judge and jury towards was simply allowing him to serve a life sentence. That way, you know, at least they're not killing her son. And I think a lot of that is part of the the reason why she was talking about how the death sentence is the most cruel thing that you can push onto another human being, and that she also made in the movie, in the actual film, she made an argument to say that as good Christians, you don't want to cause harm to another Christian, and that the state of Florida is not above God. I thought that was a solid argument. Sure, you got it, lady. That's one way to say that. And then, but in her real life testimony, she didn't say any of that. So.
Okay. You mean the clip at the end? She didn't say any of that.
Right, in the clip.
Okay. So this also reminds me of something else. I'm sure you've heard of separation of church and state.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if Florida does that. I don't know if any of the states honestly do separation of church and state or anything of that sort. But how she was saying that the state of Florida is not above God, well, I mean, sure, the death sentence, the electric chair, is a very cruel thing to do to someone, but what about the things that Ted Bundy did? You don't, you as a mother don't consider those things cruel? Like, what would you say to the mothers of all the daughters that, that he murdered, Like, what would be justice in this case? I understand, I will say this. She is his mother, and mothers are supposed to love their children, so she's just trying to save her son's face by saying that. But if she was put in the same room as the mothers of the daughters that he killed, what would she have to say then? What would she have to say to them about everything that he did? What would those mothers want as justice for what Ted Bundy did?
Yeah. You're right. How would she be able to justify to those mothers the cruelty placed onto their daughters by this man? I mean, yeah, it wouldn't be a very easy thing to ration out and talk about, but by no means.
He wasn't just a serial killer. Again, going by Wikipedia, which has sources at the bottom, the first sentence, literally the first sentence, Theodore Robert Bundy was an American serial killer, kidnapper, rapist, burglar, and necrophile who assaulted and murdered numerous young women and girls during the 1970s and possibly earlier. That is crazy. He wasn't just a serial killer. I mean, once he committed his murders, or before he committed these murders, he probably tortured these poor women and girls before, they succumbed to their death. So it's nasty. It's nasty to think about all these things. And he may, and I think I said this in the beginning of the podcast, that he may be one of the most infamous serial killers of all time. It's almost like martyrdom. These people, I don't know the names of any of the victims, but his name is well known. Ted Bundy is a known name. I didn't know much about him, but I knew that he was a serial killer who committed a whole bunch of crimes, including these that we're talking about. So.
But that's very common in that. If you look at mass shootings, if you look at anywhere where you have a high number of victims, it's not the victims that are remembered. It's typically the person doing the attack, or the assault, or the kidnapping, or the raping, or the killing. It's always that person that's remembered.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
That being the reality.
So kind of continuing on that note of the glorification of the assaulter. The movie does show a couple of scenes in which in which it hints at the popularity of Ted Bundy,
Yeah.
where they are interviewing all these young ladies
Oh yeah.
in the state of Florida, and they are gushing about how handsome he is and how he 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 can't be this crazy killer person. He just can't be, and all they're basing that on is what they're seeing on the TV, his character, or the character that he is showing the world, and his good looks.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's
Yeah.
all they're going off of.
Yeah.
And he had quite a fan base.
Yeah.
At least that's what the movie in those scenes show. And I'd be interested in seeing how big of a fan base he had, or if there was even a fan club of some sort. Wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me either. I mean, you've heard the name Richie Ramirez, right? Who was another serial killer who was active on the West Coast in the 80s. And that dude, after he got caught, got a whole bunch of love letters from girls when he went to jail. So these things,
Richie Ramirez.
Richie Ramirez. Yeah.
I don't follow serial killers on Twitter. So I don't. That's pre Twitter time.
Yeah.
But I don't know too many serial killers, and that's not something I've dived into or have ever really been interested in. So yeah, you'll have to excuse me on that one.
No worries. But the movie did do a good job. And speaking of the movie, I think Zac Efron did do a good job of portraying somebody who can create a charm of himself and manipulate others. I think Zac Efron did a good job of portraying that, portraying, the evil ass Ted Bundy. And in those scenes where he was growing out his hair, growing out his beard, it was almost uncanny the way he started looking like Ted Bundy to me. I don't know if he had to like alter the way I mean, obviously, yeah, he altered the way he looked, but it was creeping me out how close to Ted Bundy he started to look, It worked for him, it worked for the movie, it was definitely effective, and it was pissing me off the way he was getting away with so much shit, which probably means that he was doing a good job. I remember one time at a certain point in the movie where he tried to run away, right?
When he jumped out the window.
Yeah. He jumped out the window, and he was just trying to get away, and there were girls eyeing him around. He tried to change his clothes a little bit, and he was just walking around town, and girls were just looking him up and down. So there was that they were also portraying, but he was trying to get back to his main girl. I think I gotta look up what her name was. Her name was Liz. He was trying to get back to Liz, and for the entire movie, they were kind of making her seem like she was in a gray area of whether she could believe any of the stuff she's hearing about him or not. And she finally does give him up once towards the end of the movie. Like what she visits him in jail
at the
very end. And that kind of reminds me a little bit of, I mean, you haven't watched Game of Thrones yet, but this character named Jaime Lannister and the love he has for his evil twin sister Cersei Lannister. I don't understand how, but again,
right,
it's...
Can I pause you on that?
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen Game of Thrones yet.
Yeah.
Haven't started a single episode yet. Let's not ruin that series for me just yet.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying how just the idea of being in love with somebody who's evil, and you hear all this evil shit being spat about them on the news, and you yourself are doubting that any of this is true. This is also kind of akin to present day R. Kelly. Like, I don't know if you've heard throughout this year what people have been saying about R. Kelly.
I've been loosely following that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can relate that kind of disassociation with a lot of the things going on, especially just politics in the news right now. But there's it's difficult to change somebody's mind when they are deeply entrenched in wanting to believe something. When a person wants to believe what they want to believe, um, it, it's almost as if evidence doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And
In her case,
I
that's
think, well, yeah, in the case of this Ted Bundy movie, if you look at the character Liz, she had to receive an envelope from a detective showing pictures of some of um, the violent crime scenes that he left behind, and um, it took that kind of evidence to show her that the person she thought she knew, she didn't actually know. And yeah, sometimes you don't have that concrete level of proof, and that person is just allowed to continue to do what they do, um, unbeknownst to you. Yeah, it's a scary situation.
wasn't it also implied that the detective that gave her those pictures of proof that he like hacksaw because he wrote on the glass hacksaw at the end of the movie, right?
Yeah, he
Didn't
did.
it wasn't it also implied that the detective gave her that evidence and she just left it in her at her work desk for like years and
Oh,
years and she didn't even open it until he was about to be electrocuted for death or something?
I didn't even catch on to that, but I think you make a great point there in that even when provided the evidence, she completely ignored it,
Yeah.
refused to open it, and she just held on to it
Yeah.
uh, without prying any deeper. And I think part of that, now that you mention it, I think part of it is that she wanted to preserve her mental image of who she thought uh, Ted was.
Well, in a way, I guess I can say I can't blame her because also I don't even know if this person existed in real life. I wish I did a little more background research before like going into the movie or
Are
even
are you talking about Liz?
yeah, I'm talking about
You
this.
know, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that character existed in real life and if she did, I don't know if all the things lined up,
Well,
but the actress, I
well,
think
well. They showed a picture of what looked like her in the end of the movie. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't question that too closely.
okay,
That's I think it's fair to say that yes,
that she was real.
her character is real,
Okay.
as she played a very critical role in the movie.
True. Yeah, she definitely did. And the interesting thing, and I had a hunch while I was watching the movie, but I found out after I started researching the movie that her coworker who looked like he had a crush on her was played by
Yeah.
Haley Joel Osment, who
Okay.
was Forrest Gump Jr. in Forrest Gump, and also did a movie with
What?
yeah
Really?
yeah
Okay.
I didn't
That's a
realize
fun
this.
fact.
I know, right? I had a hunch when I was watching it, but I thought maybe it was just some guy that looked like him. But yeah, that was him. That was him. Forrest Gump. He also did a movie with Bruce Willis, which the name of the movie escapes me. But yeah, I just thought that was a interesting choice for that character. Um, but yeah, going back to Liz and going back to all the things that Ted Bundy was getting away with, and the lawyer too, and the judge who was played by John Malkovich. There was a scene at the end, one of the real clips where he's trying to be his own lawyer, and the judge is going, do not point your finger at me, young man." Like he was,
Yes.
that was real. That
Yeah.
was actually real.
Yeah. That did happen.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that they captured, I guess, Ted Bundy's cockiness and thinking that he could get away with all of these things. Even one of the scenes where he was in jail, where he was arrested apparently for Grand Theft Auto. Like he stole like a bug car, whatever those cars are called, Volkswagen Beetles.
Yeah.
And he says to the guy, the prosecutor, whatever, for the sentencing, he goes, "Isn't that a little excessive for car theft?" and then the prosecutor lays it out on him why exactly he was arrested and put in jail and all that other nonsense. So, which brings up an interesting topic, and we're gonna get a little controversial with this. Apparently, yeah.
I'm not. Are you sure you want to go controversial
Well,
on this?
you
Are
tell
you
me.
sure?
You could, all right, if you don't want to talk about
Okay.
it, you
No,
could
no,
just.
no. It's I'm just teasing.
Oh,
We
okay.
can we can broach the subject
Okay. Well,
gently.
if you don't actually want to talk about it, you could just tell me whether you agree or disagree, and then we could just move on to more subject matter. But apparently, my friend Ash, who I was watching this movie with last week, because it came out like last Friday, so this movie is still pretty new on Netflix. He told me that they were interviewing Zac Efron about this movie, and Zac Efron said one of the reasons why Bundy was getting away with all his heinous crimes for so long was because of his white privilege. So, with that, would you agree or
Interesting.
disagree?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um. Wow. I'm I'm not I'm not necessarily sure about that, but um, if we look at the time period, right? He's um, I can't remember, but the movie takes place through the 80s. No,
70s and 80s both, I think.
yeah, 70s, 80s. Um, he operated in Florida, Colorado, Utah, and
Yeah.
other areas. Um, no, maybe the actor Zac Efron, maybe he's onto something there. That part of it may have been because of that. But to say that that's the only reason why he was able to get away with everything that he did, I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, well,
Um,
part of it was what Zac Efron apparently said was that part of it was his white privilege, but that obviously wasn't the only thing that got led him to get away with it for so long. Because he did murder for several years apparently. So
yeah, but if you look at some of the courtroom antics and all that, I don't think any of that would have flown for anybody but um, for him.
that's another thing. Like towards the end of the trial, the judge says something like, "Oh, you could have been a lawyer, but you went a different way. I would have loved to see you practice right here in front of me, but you chose a different life, son." He sounds semi sympathetic, as if this person could have been, he could have been a decent man, but he
Which is true if you look at the if even if you just look at the relationship that he had with that young lady, he had everything that he needed to have a successful relationship with her, except that he liked murdering people. He
too
liked
much.
kidnapping people. He
Yeah.
couldn't get away from hitting people over the head with a log, and that's a problem.
Yeah. That's a
that is not the means to a sound, steady relationship with anybody. If you
yeah.
have to sneak out at night and hit somebody over the head with a log, that's you can't be doing that kind of stuff.
I think, and at the end there, like the end scene where Liz is visiting him to confront him, she even, I think I recall, if I recall correctly, she asked, "Did you ever want to kill me?" I think she actually asked him that, and then there was a scene that implied that maybe he did, just to show that he was in power and he could have done whatever he wanted, including choking her to death. He didn't, obviously, but I think they implied that he had that thought, you know? So,
Um, that's not what I got from that scene. That line of questioning, where really the young lady is fighting for her uh, conscious freedom, in that he clearly still had a strangle over her thought, in
okay.
that she couldn't get away from she couldn't get away from thinking about him, thinking about what he could have done to her family. But he never chose to act on anything. If he thought about it at some point, he never acted on it.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, it's difficult to say that he didn't actually feel something for Liz.
I'm sure he did. Yeah, I mean, as evil as he is, I'm sure he could have still been capable of love. I think maybe he actually also loved Carol Ann, who he later on impregnated and whatnot. But
that one I wouldn't believe as much.
Probably not. Yeah. Now that I think about it,
simply because at that point in the movie, he was all about just saving himself, which at the end of it also, him wanting to save himself also allowed for the actual conviction of those other 30 murder cases. Yeah. So at least the families of those victims were able to get some closure there.
There was one part of the movie that did kind of confuse me, and maybe if I explain it to you'll be able to like quickly tell me like what it was exactly that happened. So he was in one jail, not in the jail in Colorado, or maybe it was Colorado, but he's writing down his notes for how he's gonna escape from jail, like legally escape from jail, and the detective shows up and asks him, "Have you ever been in Colorado?" or something like that. I don't remember what Bundy said in response, but the detective left satisfied. And then Bundy's lawyer has a meeting with him over the phone and says something like, "I told you not to say nothing. I told you to keep your mouth shut and don't say nothing to nobody. And now you got to go to Colorado for a trial." And Bundy was like, "All right, well, we'll figure it out." And then the lawyer's like, "No, I'm not licensed in Colorado, so good luck to you, asshole." And then hangs up and leaves. So you know the scene I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. So now that you how you described it helped me remember that scene in particular. Okay, got it. So what's your question about it though?
So the detective asked something to Bundy in jail that implicated him of another crime, which made him have to go to Colorado for a trial. So how would Bundy have had to have responded to the detective to make him innocent of that, to not have him convicted in Colorado and go to Colorado for a trial? How would Bundy have had to react in order to vindicate himself from whatever it is that the detective was trying to get him into? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, do you remember, I'm not a lawyer, so this is just my personal opinion. I think that had Bundy asked that guy who he was, and at that guy, announcing himself to be a detective or some kind of law enforcement agent, he should have asked whether or not these questions are for official matters.
Yeah.
And if they were, then he should have said, "Well, I need to see my lawyer."
Wow.
And that's it.
Interesting. Okay. So he was just being cocky. He was being cocky thinking that he was untouchable in jail, and it bit him in the ass.
Yeah, but even as an audience member, someone just watching the movie, you have no idea who that guy is in that scene.
That's true.
Yeah. Ted is in the library, and in comes this guy in a suit, and you're like, okay, well, who is this guy? But yeah, so he did not play that well.
Yeah, that is true as well. I remember when I was watching the movie and this guy showed up, I didn't know who he was or what to think of it at all until the next scene. We cut to the next scene and we see him having a conversation with his lawyer over the phone, and realize that guy was more important than we thought. in the movie anyway, like what he had done there. So um one particular thing. So the thing about serial killers is, and now I'm not a student of psychology per se, but the thing about serial killers that I understand it is that nobody is born a serial killer. Nobody is born evil. However, you may be born with traits that could lead to serial killing. I think that's how it is, or I could be wrong about that as well. I remember one day reading about Ted Bundy on Wikipedia, and him there was this one time where his aunt, I think his mom's sister, was asleep in a bed just taking a nap during the day, and she woke up with a bunch she woke up surrounded by knives from the kitchen, and she looked at the corner of the bed, and 3-year-old Ted Bundy was there smiling. This was 3 years old. So while his auntie was asleep, he surrounded her with kitchen knives, and he was smiling when he woke up. So basically that means that even at close to an infant age.
That's no. I don't think that's a fair assessment. Kids do stupid things. Kids are creepy. But to say that, okay, you can point at an event that early on in somebody's life, and that's a clear and precise definition of who they will be. I think that's horseshit.
Well,
I think that's horseshit.
It's
also, I'm sure I'm open to the idea that there are psychologists that'll say that I'm wrong. That is fair. I am also not a student of psychology, so my assessment on that could be totally wrong.
Well, I will venture to say I think that that's just very disturbing behavior. Like, yeah, kids do stupid shit. That's true. But for kids to play with knives and to take a bunch of knives and put them on a bed with your aunt sleeping there, knowing that knives are dangerous and pointy and you bleed if you mess around with them, you know that they're dangerous. I mean, 3 years old still, yeah. I mean, like, this 3-year-old was, old enough to get the knives and know that they're dangerous and surround her aunt. So let me read the quote from Wikipedia. So the quote says, Bundy occasionally exhibited disturbing behavior even at an early age. Julia, the aunt, recalled awakening one day from a nap to find herself surrounded by knives from the cow kitchen. Her 3-year-old nephew was standing by the bed smiling. So I take that as, again, yeah, neither of us are students of psychology, but to me, that's just really creepy and a sign early on that Bundy was going to be a horrible human being. But I digress. You could be right as well. I'm just saying, my piece on it. But overall, in terms of this movie, extremely wicked, shockingly evil and vile. It does a good job of portraying how Bundy was able to get away with this so much, because his public persona, the way women saw him, I guess the way his colleagues saw him, because he was a law student. He was a law student going to law school, and he messed all of that up just because of his evil tendencies. So I think that was the angle from which the movie was trying to portray how Bundy is perceived as a charming young man who could never be capable of these things, and we saw that with all those interviews with those girls who thought that he could never be capable of such things. So I think that was the angle that the movie was going from, and I like that the movie also just went straight to him getting caught and stuff instead of setting up the evil stuff that he did. So with those 2 points, I guess, since we're nearing the end of our podcast here, if we're going to go into ratings.
Well, but before we cut to the end here, I do want to ask you the same question. So, why do you think he was able to keep that going for as long as he did? Because as we started this show, you brought up the fact that at the end of the movie, they mention that he confessed to 30 murders. However, the number could be significantly higher.
Yeah.
Why do you think that went on for so long?
I think he perhaps he had a pretty high IQ. You know, just because he was evil doesn't mean he was stupid. He could have been even though he was also cocky like the movie portrayed, he could have been really smart. So he may have known how to play around with women's emotions, make them trust him. And once he committed his first murder, like he had that experience of how to commit a murder and get away with it, and he would go off of that and continue to do it again and again. So I thought perhaps it is because, and I do think his white privilege plays into it. So I think part of it is his white privilege, part of it was his intelligence. Perhaps he was smart and he knew how to do it, how to win the trust of women and get them to trust him and then commit these murders again and again until he left such a high paper trail that it was inevitable that he would get caught. So I think it would be a combination of those things. I think it would be his privilege as well as his intelligence and his experience in being a serial killer, literally, if all that makes sense.
Okay, so you think he got a lot of practice, so
Unfortunately, yeah.
he became very he became a subject matter expert at using a log to hit people over the head.
And he was
Got
a
it.
well, yeah. Well, I mean, if that's how he did it most of the time, committed his murders, and he was also a law student, so he knew probably how to talk his way out of things and whatnot. So I think all those things combined, and this was a long time ago. This was like the late '60s, '70s, and '80s that he was rampant. So that was a different time. That was a completely different time from the time that we're living in now, where people can get caught much quicker. Well, it depending on the type of person, the crime and whatnot, people can get caught in different ways. Not the same as it was back then. So, what about you? Why do you think he was able to get away with it for so long?
Oh well, you had already asked me this question.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I think I
And
did.
in part, you had asked it in regards to Zac Efron, what his thoughts were during a interview that he had, and then you had shot it back to me. But yeah, no, I think handsome young man, um, in 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 that time span in America, you uh, it was because people weren't so interconnected um, via the internet,
Yeah, social media.
and there was a heavy dependence on publication, um, localized news in order to alert people of dangers
Yeah,
like him. Um, there just wasn't a method to very easily identify him as the social threat
yeah,
that he
yeah.
was, and yeah, that he was able to keep it going
Keep
for a very
yeah,
long time.
keep a low profile like that. Yeah. So and if someone like him emerged in this time frame, perhaps they, I mean, hopefully, God willing, they would be caught much quicker or before any they're able to get away with any such thing. But we'll never know.
Well,
And serial killers are still
that
out there.
it's interesting you mentioned that, because now I think we're going the other way, in that I think there's so much information, and that it is so easy uh, to fill up um, the. So let's say we do have a major threat like him within our society. Um, I think that if local news were to put up his picture um, tomorrow, an even bigger threat or something else of higher importance will come up and very quickly drown out that information.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like
So,
it was hard enough, like in that movie, how Liz was the one who admitted that she was the one who drew, like, admitted his sketch. Like there was a sketch of him in the newspaper, right? And some people were like, "Oh, that kind of looks like Bundy, but oh, that could be anyone." Blah blah blah. So yeah, if something like that happened this time around, such and such picture would probably be a much more accurate to the person that the police or
oh,
whoever is trying to chase.
I agree. It'd be an accurate picture.
Hmm.
However, um, I don't think the picture will be seen by enough people because instead of looking through newspapers, people will be busy looking at their personalized Instagram
Oh
feeds
yeah, yeah,
that are only showing pictures of cupcakes and cats.
yeah.
So,
That's social media
so
for you.
you're not gonna get that information.
Yeah,
Um, or yeah, so it's interesting times we're approaching.
yeah. But I mean, depending on the crime and depending on the person, they can get caught quicker than others. I mean, we were talking about R. Kelly earlier, who's famous, and during Gayle King's interview, he was saying, why is everybody coming after me now? And Gayle King says, we're living in a different time where women are speaking up and whatnot. So, but R. Kelly is a conversation for another time. Um,
Yeah, is there a documentary on R. Kelly that we could watch?
there is,
Maybe talk
and
about?
we could get into that in just a minute. Before we do that, I just want to do ratings. Because the name of this movie, just for the record, is extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile. I would give it overall. I'd say I'd give it maybe an 8 out of 10. What would you give it?
Uh, no, and I don't want this to be recurring, but I'm gonna go with a 7 out of 10.
Fair. Yeah,
It
I
it
was juggling between 7 and 8.
yeah. So 7 out of 10. It was a good movie. I wouldn't watch it again. So as far as rewatchability, once you've seen it once, you've seen it.
Yeah,
You
that's true.
you got the gist of it.
Yeah.
Um, Although I'm sure if I were to see it again, there are other little nuances that I'd pick up on.
Yeah.
Um, but the subject matter doesn't really capture my attention. Um, this is out of my area of like, oh, I really like watching movies like this.
That would be
But
yeah. That would be the only
it
reason I
was
would go back to watch it again too, is to like pick up on things that I didn't catch the first time. So, but but yeah, I guess that concludes our session on this podcast. So, this movie was my suggestion. It's your turn now. Unless have you thought
yeah.
of what you want to talk about in the next
Oh
episode?
yeah. No. So there's a movie I recently saw. This is why I was struggling to watch uh, the Ted Bundy movie because um, I was watching this movie on Netflix called Ruthless, and that's the movie that we'll be talking about on the next episode. And
Ruthless.
so Ruthless, it is not an English movie. It is, you will have to read the whole movie. It is in Italian, but Netflix does have very good subtitles for it. Um, and it's the rise and fall of a drug dealer.
Ah,
That
okay. I love me some
that's
crime dramas. Okay, I could get into that.
yes. So I think if we start talking about crime movies and crime dramas, yeah, there are a lot, and that's love those kinds of movies.
So
But with that said, that's what we'll be focusing on the next
next
episode.
episode, okay.
So I just want to take some time to, again, give another shout out to all the mothers this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Happy
Um,
Mother's Day,
Happy
y'all.
Mother's
I bought a
Day.
bunch of flowers for my mom yesterday, but yeah, that I guess that's
And
about it. That concludes this episode of the As of Yet Unnamed podcast. Thank you again for listening, all those of you who have been listening. Again, Al Rogers, and other than that, we are signing off. Take care.
Peace.